A lot of the videos I make for this channel are older games or shows that I played or watched when I was younger, but that doesn't mean I'm only playing these types of games in my downtime. Just like any other video game connoisseur, I'm occasionally picking up something new, or old, and trying it out. So here's a brief series of mini reviews for some games I've been playing the last few months during this whole pandemic business. Every console generation has a game that really defines it, and for the PlayStation 1, I think that game was Final Fantasy VII. We're talking about a JRPG that came out at a time where character models looked like this, and combat looked like this, and yet this was a game that defined a generation of JRPGs for a lot of people my age. A game that was so mouth-wateringly popular that it spawned numerous spin-off games, animated companion pieces, and became a whole franchise on its own within an already massively popular franchise. It was wild. Despite that, it was still a game that quite a few people had never played and had only heard about the hype, and I was one of those people, not having the hardware to make it work when I was younger, and still haven't played it as an adult even after it got ported to modern consoles. I just never had much interest in it, and I didn't know much about the game itself at its roots, only bearing some surface level knowledge of its characters and setting. It was always that game that I made really cheap jokes about, with the main character's anime hair and absurdly large sword, but that was about it. And yet, when the game was announced for a remake, my interest shot up. It looked incredible, the demo they put out was fun, and overall I was very excited to play it. So I did. And I loved it. Seriously, Final Fantasy VII Remake was insanely fun to play, and I was hooked on it from beginning to end. The combat was flashy and exciting, the soundtrack was amazing, the characters were easy to latch onto and grow fond of. I think the weirdest sensation I had playing this game was how nostalgic I was for it, despite having never played the original and only bearing approximate knowledge of its setting and characters before now. There were so many things within this game that have cropped up in other media and become so influential, such as the soundtrack, that there were moments where I got literal chills when a song I recognized came on in a specific boss fight, and by the end of the game, I was eager to see more of the story, which is probably the only major gripe I have about it. Going in, I knew full well that Remake was not a full remake of Final Fantasy VII, instead only covering the very early parts of the original game before you even hit the world map. And a lot of people have ripped into the game for this, but it didn't bother me too much until I started to get to the finish line. There was this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach that I can't quite properly describe. The knowledge that despite how the story was building up to this grand epic finale for the end of the game, I knew that Cloud and the others' journey was only just getting started, and it'll probably be 2 to 3 years more before we see the next segment. Maybe even longer than that if this damn pandemic doesn't let up and people don't stay at home, you freaking morons, jeez! And a few people I know are also upset about major changes made to the story, particularly near the end of this act, but as someone who never played the original, it didn't affect me as much. In fact, I actually thought the twist they took was really interesting and a creative bit of meta commentary on what a remake of a beloved game like this should be. But hey, I can also understand why someone might be upset that something they held in such high regard when they were younger is being changed in a way they don't like. But also, you know, the original game still exists, so if it really bugs you that much, you can go back and play it. Definitely recommend this game, though. It was really good. Give it a go. So, I already reviewed Fire Emblem Three Houses on this channel, but given that we live in an age of digital expansions and DLC, luck would have it that this was not the end of Three Houses' influence over me within the next year. Cindered Shadows is a major content expansion for Three Houses that included more story content, more characters to recruit during the main story, and a few quality of life improvements to help make things better. Notably, one thing they added was it's now possible to guarantee who ends up in a paired ending after you beat the game, which is great when you want, say, Ash and Ingrid to end up together because they're really cute, but because you let Ash fight a little too closely to Dedue in the final chapter of your Blue Lions campaign, he instead decides to go off to open a restaurant with him after the war instead. Which, hey, good for them. But damn it, Ash, marry the woman in the OTP I set up, please. I was pushing hard for this all game, and your love epiphany for snacks, both literal and figurative, is sinking my ships and breaking my heart, man. Anyway, the main update that came with Cindered Shadows was an additional story campaign, one that wasn't the length of any of the main campaigns in the main game, but instead focused on a short side story that took place during the main scenario. It involves investigating a mysterious, unofficial fourth house called the Ashen Wolves that exists underneath Garrigmach Monastery in a place known as the Abyss. Yes, there is somehow an entire underground city under the monastery that nobody talks about. Why isn't this more well known? Well, your first mistake was asking questions. The most important thing that comes out of all this are the new characters in the Ashen Wolves house. The characters have their own story that unfolds as part of the DLC, but even after you complete the scenario and they go on their merry way, you can then unlock them in the main story to recruit into your house, where they will have supports like normal characters, have time skip outfits, the whole works. It was a nice change of pace with how the past few DLC characters have been handled, namely Anna, who didn't add much to the overall game at all and didn't feel terribly justified other than just saying, hey, look, Anna can be in your army. The other character they added in the interim was better, but I don't want to go into them for mild spoiler reasons. Cindered Shadows was a fun little side expansion pack though. It was short and to the point in its execution, which was oddly refreshing after playing the main game. Don't get me wrong, I think Three Houses is a great game and I greatly enjoyed it, but I think one of my main gripes about it was how padded out some sequences could feel. Running around the monastery to get every single bit of information from students and NPCs, exhausting your daily points and doing other stuff is all in good fun and a major part of the game, but it was also something that took a lot of time, and towards the end of the game, I often found myself skipping the monastery altogether just to keep the story moving. Cindered Shadows has the Abyss to explore as sort of a mini monastery, but even then, your activities are incredibly limited. You talk to NPCs, gear up for the next fight, and once you have exhausted all things to do, the game automatically asks you if you want to move on. Hell, for several chapters, you didn't even go back there. It moved at a good pace, and although the story was short, it didn't feel cheap. The actual story chapters were fun to play. Each map had a small gimmick that you had to get around, but it never felt cheap or unfair. The new characters were also fun to get to know and brought with them some more classes that you'd get to use in the main game. And I like that this was a way to have the three house leaders fight alongside each other without creating a fix-it path in the main story like Fates did. That was something I really respected about Three Houses' story in general, that no matter who you side with, you're not going to get an ending where everyone gets what they want. Some people are going to lose. They're gonna lose really hard. Cindered Shadows is a good DLC and I'm glad I played it. I'm looking forward to finishing off my other routes that I haven't completed in the main game with the Ashen Wolves along for the ride. Along with the fortune teller, who is now going to be the MVP, so I can make sure my ships happen the way they're supposed to. Looking at you, Ash. Alright, I do want to make a Phantasy Star Online 2 video at some point, so if you were expecting that from me, don't worry, it's coming. Eventually. After years of waiting, PSO2 finally came to the West. The game is finally here. All those years of people having to create their own English patch to play it and joking about how it become vaporware are finally past us. The sequel to one of my favorite online games as a kid finally made landfall in the West. Of course, I didn't expect the game to be exactly like the original PSO. It's been like a decade after all, but I do appreciate how the game does try to be a spiritual successor to the original PSO the best it can. There's classic sound effects, items, classes, and a few mechanics that are a great nod to the original. The combat has a rhythm to it that echoes the combat of the original, how you need to time your attacks properly when using them because it's the best way to optimize your damage and keep yourself out of danger. And there's also a lot of stuff to go through right now. I mean, a lot. The game released in the West with the first 3 major content updates, or episodes as they call them, already unlocked, so there is plenty of stuff to keep you going for a while. Every Western player is now experiencing the dilemma of joining an MMO that their friends have been playing for years. This is the same problem I'm having when trying to recommend Final Fantasy XIV to people. Anyway, I'm enjoying the game so far, truly, but I also haven't been playing it as much as I probably could have been. I've got a whole video planned out that'll go deeper into my thoughts on the game as a whole. It's just been hard to nail it down for some reason. I've rewritten the script about 4 times and re-recorded it twice. Finally, I just had to step away for a minute and let it sit before coming back. But we'll get there eventually. Yeah, so now we're getting to the portion of the video where I do the donkey style review of just talking about games that I've actually been playing, regardless of when they actually came out. Resident Evil is a series I didn't get into until the 4th one, but I don't think I'm alone in that regard because most people I talk to hold 4 as some sort of sacred cow of the series. Doesn't help that it's been ported to every console under the sun and how the game, in most places, still holds up. It's why the news of it supposedly getting remade in the near future has garnered some mixed responses. Quite a few people just think that RE4 doesn't suffer from the same technical limitations as its predecessors, and is not dated enough to warrant a remake yet. And this is probably why so many people have reacted so positively to the remake of Resident Evil 2 instead that came out last year. The game updated a lot, from the controls to the story to the characters to a bunch of other stuff that makes it stand on its own 2 legs and yet still honors the spirit of the original. I've been itching to play this game since it came out, but just never did due to not having the time. But now, seeing as how everything sort of just stopped, I did find that time. And boy, was it worth the wait. All the classic elements of survival horror are here, managing your dwindling supplies, the suffocating fear of being trapped in a dimly lit hellscape with hordes of monsters, cheesy dialogue, you name it. This was a great experience, and it actually made me get sort of fearful and annoyed at zombies again. Zombies in the past have just turned into sort of like a mindless obstacle that you can mow down, but no, zombies in Resident Evil 2 will mess you up. The game was a blast to play again and again, which is helped by how its replayability is massive due to the different scenarios and how the setup of the game seemed to just encourage speedrunning practice. What's the record sitting at now? Like under an hour or some crazy nonsense? I definitely recommend playing this if you haven't yet. Hell, if you've never played Resident Evil in general, this is a great starting point. And I haven't played the RE3 remake yet, but I do plan to at some point. Though, similar with what happened with this game, I'll probably end up picking it up like a year from now when it's on sale for $20. Given some of the reviews I've read about it, that's probably for the best. If there's another genre that has high replayability and as a result is a long-time pleasure of mine, it's stealth games, where you have multiple different ways to complete an objective. Games like Hitman, Deus Ex, and of course, the Dishonored franchise. Dishonored has always been this strange little nugget of a game that I feel like doesn't get enough buzz. You play as an assassin looking to get revenge for some sort of injustice taken against you or someone you love in each game. You carry out that revenge by tracking down targets and either killing them or enacting some sort of merciful yet cruel creative punishment. You do all this while wielding magic powers, neat steampunk-like gadgets, and more. Your actions had consequences and affected the world around you too. It was all wonderful. Death of the Outsider is the latest game in the series, and while it keeps a lot of these elements, it also discarded quite a few, which I'm still not sure if I'm okay with. The game is a standalone, moderately DLC-sized game where you play as Billy Lurk seeking to kill the Outsider, the magical being of the void that keeps granting assassins superpowers like someone giving out free samples of mozzarella at a Costco. As a result, the entire bulk of the game is building Billy up to that task, whether it be tracking down a special weapon that will let her do the deed, or just figuring out how she's going to be able to get to wherever the hell the Outsider is so she can actually kill him. Death of the Outsider plays with classic Dishonored mechanics of mixing stealth with the magic powers and gadgets for a creative and intuitive approach to play, while also fine-tuning mechanics that have been used before. You know, classic sequel goals. Probably my favorite thing they've done is remove the need for magic restoring potions, instead just having your void powers refill automatically. I love it because this encourages you to use your powers as often as you can while also balancing it in a way where you don't go completely nuts. Something I'm not crazy about, though, is how they removed the chaos system from the first 2 games. Not only because I feel like the chaos system sort of defined Dishonored as a whole with the whole your choices matter theme, but also because part of me wonders if they just sort of did this so they didn't have to spend too much time designing levels to have 2 different versions of themselves based on your chaos rating. The game does still track your stats and grade you on your performance and approach to completing each level, so at the very least they haven't given up that core aspect of the series. It's the sort of thing that still encourages replayability in a very short game. Finally, I'm a bit disappointed that they've downplayed having human targets be the main objectives of each mission. Having a living, breathing target that you learn about in each stage through environmental cues and notes was a lot of fun and made their assassination or cruel mercy that much sweeter. But in Death of the Outsider, there's only one assassination target that puts any real emphasis on that: the Outsider. The rest of the game is just building up to that confrontation, which, hey, poetic, but it does make each mission a tad less engaging in my eyes. There is a contract system where you can complete bonus objectives to earn some more coin, and many of those contracts have human assassination targets, but none of those targets held the same significance to me as targets in the past games did. In the end, I think I'm just a little disappointed with Death of the Outsider. I enjoyed playing it, but I wanted more out of it. I wanted more of what made Dishonored, and while I'm happy with some of the gameplay changes they've made and hope they expand on those in the future, I think removing core mechanics like the chaos system was a step backwards. So, those are just a few games I've been playing lately. Hopefully, you guys are doing well and taking advantage of this time to catch up on games you've been putting off. Maybe learn a new skill, doing all that hobby shit. I say this because I'm hoping you're doing your best not to go out during quarantine. Seriously, please, stay home, stay safe, and stay smart, folks. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled erratic programming on this channel in the near future. See ya.
I have feelings for you.
I have feelings for you.
The feeling was friendship, but neither had ever experienced it.